Well, good evening and welcome to The Hill on NewsNation. I'm Kelly Meyer filling in for Blake Berman. Israel and Iran continue to trade strikes as we enter the fifth day of this Middle East conflict. The U.S. getting even more involved as the Pentagon sends warplanes and fighter jets to the region. And President Trump hunkering down in the Situation Room today, saying the skies over Iran are under complete and total control as the administration vows to end Iran's nuclear program. And back here at home, turmoil in the Democratic National Committee after a do-over election. We go live with the DNC vice chair on what's ahead for the Democrats. Plus, this dramatic moment out of New York today.
Let's go. You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens. Sir, you don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens.
New York City mayoral candidate Brad Landier arrested by federal agents while visiting an immigration court just hours ago. We break down the latest on what happened there. And some breaking news at the top of this hour as we are hearing reports that Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was hospitalized in D.C. just moments ago after having an allergic reaction. Noem is conscious in the hospital and has spoken to her security detail. That is all we know right now, but I just confirmed that with the DHS official. We'll bring you those updates as soon as they come in. And at the moment, we begin tonight with the escalating conflict in the Middle East. NewsNation correspondent Robert Sherman joins us from Israel, where tensions continue to rise. Robert.
Hey there, Kelly. And the tensions ever present and the threats constant here, even playing out just moments ago, in which Iran fired another salvo of missiles here at our position in Tel Aviv. We actually just got out of the bomb shelter just moments ago here. This is something that has been playing out throughout the day, and Iran continues to showcase they have the capability to strike Israel in all corners of the country. Haifa to the north, the Negev Desert to the south, and where we are in central Israel, Tel Aviv. But what we have noticed here, Kelly, today is that while the salvos are coming more frequently, they tend to be smaller in size, 6, 8, 10 missiles. What the Israelis are telling us tonight is that they believe that this is evidence of a degradation of Iran's capabilities, and that they believe that because they have been knocking out some of their launch positions and they've been pushing Iran from the western portion of the country back to the central, that they believe that they have degraded Iran's capabilities by their estimates 35 to 40%. Iran pushes back on all of this, saying that what they have been showcasing so far is meant to deter Israel, but they are prepared to up their efforts to what they describe as punitive level, if that is what this comes to. The big question here tonight is the other aspect here, the nuclear aspect of Iran, and will the United States be entering this war directly? That still remains unclear, but it's a question that everyone on the ground here has at this hour. What we do know, speaking with the Israelis, is that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump remain in what they describe as frequent contact with one another, waiting and planning the next steps here. Kelly?
Robert Sherman, stay safe, my friend. We're thinking about you, and we'll keep us posted as the news develops there, okay? Well, President Trump meeting in the Situation Room today with his top advisors after racing home from the G7 meeting in Canada last night. The president announcing on social media, quote, "We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran," and touting the strength of the U.S.-made weapons that are being used against Iran right now. Shortly after, he called for, quote, "unconditional surrender." On his overnight flight to Washington, the president laid out his goal. Take a listen.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end, a real end, not a ceasefire. An end.
So something that will be permanent.
Or giving up entirely.
But President Trump, he's getting some bipartisan pushback in Congress from lawmakers who want to limit the scope of his authority as commander-in-chief. A group of House members introduced a war powers resolution today that would prohibit U.S. military involvement against Iran without direct congressional authorization. Here now with me is West Virginia Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito, who voted against a similar resolution back in 2020. Good to see you, Senator. Thank you so much for taking the time. I wanted to ask you, and we'll start here with your vote back in 2020. You voted against the war powers resolution after President Trump ordered the attack that killed Qasem Soleimani, saying Iran will only be deterred from future attacks. if they know that the president has the full authority to respond if they or their proxies kill Americans. And if this resolution were to become law, that authority would be called into question. My question here is, do you feel the same way now as you did then?
Oh, I absolutely do. I think that President Trump has great powers here, and I think he has expressed restraint, and I think he's also expressed the desire for a ceasefire, for no more killing, for a peaceful solution, and I think that's where he's going to go. But I don't want to take any of the tools out of his toolbox at this point. We can wait and see what's going to happen into the future, but right now I would vote that exact same way, yes.
And I wanted to play a little bit about what your Senate colleague Lindsey Graham had to say about the conflict in the Middle East today. Take a listen to this and we'll talk on the other side.
Yeah, I think the president's doing the right thing. I think we should go in to help Israel to end their nuclear program. I think the Ayatollah nuclear bomb would be a devastating event for the world. We need to stop it.
The question tonight for you, and I think really that's on everyone's mind, is do you think the U.S. is going to end up in this war?
Well, I think obviously that remains to be seen. I think we're obviously sharing intelligence. We are providing weapons. We have to keep in front of mind that Iran wants to destroy America. They are an enemy of our country and have professed that very loudly and clearly for decades. They want to develop a nuclear weapon, and we must do everything we can, joining with Israel, to prevent that from happening. I think it's premature and I think probably unwise to speculate how deep this will go when the stated desire of our president, President Trump, is to find a solution that would end this and would have it end with Iran not having a weapon and the simmering down of the hostilities in that area.
And I have to ask you, you were briefed, too, by the Vice President, J.D. Vance, today. You had a meeting with him also on the big, beautiful bill, and we'll get to that. But did anyone ask him about the current situation in the Middle East and what the president might be planning next?
He did talk about it, actually. He talked as questions, but obviously he's been in the Situation Room for several days as this has been unfolding. And I think he has expressed exactly what I have, restraint in terms of any kind of over-involvement by our country, but certainly that it is in our best interests and the world's best interest, quite frankly, to prevent them from developing a nuclear weapon. We know that there's between Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, there is a coalition here of countries that want to see us in a less powerful position, and we have to keep that front of mind. But that's about as far as he went, and obviously he's very supportive of what the president's doing.
I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about what's going on domestically and here in your state. At least 7 people are dead from those flash floods that started over the weekend. The search and rescue recovery efforts are ongoing, but it comes at a time when President Trump has backed the idea of shifting responsibility for disaster response to the states. I want to play part of what you said back in May about that, and then we'll talk on the other side.
I am concerned about the FEMA issue. Coming from a small state that is subject to a lot of natural disasters, flooding in most cases, FEMA, my experience with FEMA, has it been flawless? Has it been, a smooth road? No, but I think it's a vital function.
So do you expect FEMA cuts and layoffs and the changes there to impact the recovery efforts in your state, or are they already?
They are not impacting. I think FEMA is on the ground. If not now, they will be shortly. The elected officials, our governor's been there. Congressman Moore's been up there to inspect that. So I think what we have to see here is FEMA has a vital role. There is no doubt about it. As I said in my testimony, a small state cannot handle these devastating occurrences on a regular basis. We don't have the money. We don't have the skill set. We don't have the emergency sort of as response that FEMA has. So we need FEMA, but we need it to be that flawless, perfect entity that can help any state in any situation. So I'm a supporter of FEMA, quite frankly, with reforms.
Okay, supporter with reforms. And I wanted to ask you quickly, I've been over at the White House where they've been making that push for the big, beautiful bill. You're on Capitol Hill every day. What have your conversations been like about this bill with the White House? And do you think it passes by July 4th?
Well, I think the conversations, we've obviously been working very closely with the House, working very closely with President Trump. He is having individual meetings, as is Vice President Vance, with right now senators that might have deeper concerns and questions. We are marching to the July 4th recess, which means by the end of next week, I believe we will begin voting mid next week. Leader Thune is committed to that, as I am, being a part of his leadership team. We are making some tweaks and changes, as we should, listening to members' concern. And I feel like we're on a very positive path, because we cannot let taxes go up. We need those business tax relief for our small businesses. We need to unleash energy. We need to make sure that President's promises of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and helping seniors with their taxes, all of these things are good for everyday Americans.
All right, a positive path. We'll keep in touch on that. The senior senator from West Virginia, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, thank you so much. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Kelly. Good to see you.
Take care. Well, coming up, more from Tel Aviv. A four-star general who's been in the thick of war joins me live on what the U.S. should do next. Plus, DNC division. One vice chair is out. 2 union leaders have quit. What's going on with the Democratic Party? I'll talk live with the newly elected vice chair. Plus this.
Step back. You don't have authority to arrest U.S. citizens.
Courthouse scuffle, why ICE agents arrested a candidate for New York City mayor. Welcome to Washington. The Hill is coming right back. Stay with us. Meyer in for Blake Berman. So those deadly shootings of Democratic Minnesota lawmakers leaving the party reeling, and the attack highlighting the political divides within our country. This as the Democratic Party tries to rebuild after last year's election. Malcolm Kenyatta, vice chair of the Democratic Party, joins us to talk about the future of the party and the political climate right now. Malcolm, thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. I wanted to start with... Thank you. And I wanted to start with the deadly Minnesota shooting. You're calling for more security for elected leaders after the Minnesota shooting. How will this affect recruiting good candidates for future elections, including the midterms?
Yeah, so first and foremost, obviously, all of us, our hearts are still breaking for the tragedy and the pure evil that led to the tragic assassination of Speaker Hortman, her husband, and obviously the senator and his wife are still recovering in this moment, and their kids who will never be the same and have lost in the instance of the speaker and her husband, and are going to be just changed forever in terms of what happened to the senator. Now, all that to say that I reintroduced legislation that I introduced last year that would do a couple of things in Pennsylvania. That first and foremost would make sure that we explicitly allow for candidates and for office holders to use campaign funds to get security if they need it, but also to make sure that we're extending state police protection to our caucus leaders, to our speaker, and to our row officers who do critical work for the people of Pennsylvania. But I do think in this moment, Kelly, if we are going to address this problem, we have to actually talk about what the problem is. And the problem is that we have somebody with the biggest megaphone in the world who consistently laughs about, encourages, and on day one of his presidency, pardoned 1,500 people who engaged in one of the worst acts of political violence and insurrection that we've seen in our nation's history. And when you have somebody who does that, who, tries to get people to engage, as we've seen at his rallies, telling them to go out and beat the hell out of somebody, to use some of his language. That is why we are where we are. And I, for one, am sick of us acting like this is a both sides thing where everybody needs to turn down the temperature and the rhetoric. That's nonsense. It has to start with the president of the United States, who just a day after this brutal assassination used some of the most despicable language to refer to Democrats, which is going to do nothing but further really inspire some of the worst people to go out and engage in this sort of behavior.
And just going back to my original question, too, do you think this affects getting more people to run for office, to become a public servant, because they're fearful of the political climate that they enter?
I hope not, and that's why I introduced the legislation to make sure that people can be safe and protected as best they can as we do this work. But let me also be clear about this. We need good people to step up and run for office. Maybe somebody who's watching right now, who's sick of yelling at the TV. And I would say to you, listen, raise your hand, get out there in the political arena and do everything that you can, as I'm trying to do everything that I can to make sure this party is focused on the three words that I think, Kelly, are our mission and ultimately our message. We got to make life better for working people and working family.
I want to get to also what's going on within the Democratic Party. Given all the infighting, do you have a strategy to take back the House in the midterms?
Listen, we are going to take back the House in the midterms, and a part of how and why we're going to do it is just what you saw this past weekend, where you saw millions upon millions of Americans show up in their communities saying with a clear voice that in this country, we're not bowing to a king, saying with a clear voice that they want this president to stop ignoring the Constitution and to stop engaging in the type of lawless behavior that has really been not a bug, but a feature of his administration, and calling on elected officials to stand up and treat this moment with the seriousness that it demands. And I think you're going to have a lot of people who run for office in really tough primaries, and what's going to come out of the other side of that are strong Democratic nominees who are going to be ready to win and take the fight to these Republicans against their bad ideas and talk about our affirmative vision of how we're going to make life better for working people.
Well, I got you on the record there, Malcolm. So they will take back the House. Democrats will take back the House, you say, in the midterm. So we'll check back in with you as it gets closer to that. But we appreciate your time tonight. And I know you're busy there in your car on the road. So we appreciate you taking the time
on the
to talk
road. And let me just say, Kelly, you look fantastic taking over the big desk. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Malcolm. I appreciate it. All right. Well, here to react to Kurt Bardella is our NewsNation contributor and Democratic strategist, and Dan Cannonen, Battleground States Director for the Biden-Harris campaign. All right, so a lot in there. We talked a lot about, of course, what happened to those Minnesota lawmakers, and a little bit there about the Democratic strategy going forward. So let's start with the Democratic strategy, what he talked about on the record that Democrats are going to take back the House. What do you make of that? What are they laying out right now that gives you reason to believe that Democrats can actually take back the House?
So, Kelly, with all the chatter on the infighting, and you touched on it, which can be a distraction, and this town loves a distraction. We love the palace intrigue. But the DNC is a very unsexy place to do work. It is the infrastructure. It's the plumbing of the party. And Malcolm Kenyatta is a great leader. His eye is focused on the midterms, on Make Life Better, which, by the way, this big bill does not do that. It's $3 trillion added to the debt. It's a huge tax break for billionaires and millionaires. It's a tax hike for those making less than $50,000. It's kicking 10 or 13 million off of Medicaid. That Make Life Better pitch against what's happening with the policies that are very unpopular in the Trump administration is a great place for them to start. But that infrastructure about rebuilding state parties, they've contributed more to the Red State Fund this year that helps expand the map. They've got a new podcast on messaging called Blueprint, which is helping to expand the sharp messaging to allies and advocates in that space. And Ken Martin has been leading the charge of getting people out there for town halls to activate and simply explain, connect the dots for voters with what's happening here in the Hill. That's all really good work. So my message to those guys is keep it up, ignore the noise, ignore the chatter. No one cares about the palace intrigue who is actually a voter. Do the work to communicate that message effectively, tell the midterms.
I know we were talking in the break about the leadership and having a lot of older elected officials compared to younger. We were saying that Malcolm himself, he's younger. David Hogg, we were talking about, he's younger. What is your concern, too, Kurt, about, the age of members in the party here?
Yeah, right now, I think a lot of the Democratic Party is associated with older Democrats, whether it's obviously the conversation we've been having for the last month about Joe Biden, whether it was the consternation that David Hogg raised during his contention with the DNC that he's now removed himself from. We're looking at the Oversight Committee. Congressman Jerry Connolly passed away. He was the ranking Democrat there. The race to replace him is between Stephen Lynch, who's, well into his 70s, almost 80, and members like Jasmine Crockett, who represent a much younger generation. Those are the things that just, as someone who's been in Democratic politics since 2016, that's what I'm looking at. Where is this party going in the future? Are we looking to go forward with new generation leadership, or are we going to keep going backwards and double down, I think, on some things that just don't work anymore? No one cares about palace intrigue. I totally agree with that. No one cares about the ins and outs and machinations of the party. But the visibility, the symbolism of who's at the forefront of that conversation leading that, I think it does matter. And if the message from the Democrats is, all due respect, I worked with them back in the day, Stephen Lynch versus a Jasmine Crockett, that's going to send a lot of messages to the base of the party that is looking for people to believe in, looking for people to invest in. If we don't make those right decisions now, it will hurt us in the midterms.
Interesting to see where the party goes next. Well, thank you for this conversation, you guys. We'll see you again in the next block. Dan and Kurt, thank you. So there's still much more ahead on the Hill. I want you to stay with us. We're talking all about the Middle East as it braces for an all-out war and what happens if the U.S. military gets involved here. I'm going to talk live with the retired four-star general all about that. Plus, raid reversal. Farms, hotels, and restaurants no longer off limits from ICE. But why did Trump change his mind? We're going to discuss that when the Hill returns. Stay with us.
Okay, sirens just started blaring here in Tel Aviv. Actually, in the sky, we're already starting to see some of the Iron Dome interceptors that are being launched in order to intercept some of these missiles that are coming from Iran. We now have to go into the bomb shelter quickly, so this is where we're going to head to now. Every time you check into one of these hotels, staffers tell you to make sure that you know exactly where these are located. It's that important, because this is something that happens so consistently. Safe room, as you can see right here. Right. And now we wait until this concludes and we get the all clear.
Wow, just an incredible look behind the scenes at what life is like there in Israel from our Robert Sherman there in Tel Aviv. While the sirens were going off there just moments ago, we want him and our team to stay safe out there along with everyone out there. Welcome back to the Hill. It is now 6:31. I'm Kelly Meyer in for Blake Berman tonight. A live look again at Tel Aviv, where it's about 1:30 in the morning. It's 6:30 here on the East Coast as the conflict between Israel and Iran now extends into its fifth day. President Trump calling his national security team to the Situation Room today after racing home early from the G7 in Canada. The president had been pushing for a deal with Iran, but last night he had this to say.
I told them to do the deal. They should have done the deal. Their cities have been blown to pieces and lost a lot of people. They should have done the deal. I told them do the deal. So I don't know. I'm not too much in a mood to negotiate now.
So what comes now? NewsNation's Joe Khalil is at the White House covering every angle of this story. Joe, a lot up in the air at this hour. What can you tell us?
Yeah, and you already mentioned President Trump convening his national security team. Kelly, the question before them, arguably one of the most consequential decisions President Trump is going to have to make, and that is whether the United States gets involved directly in a war with Iran, or whether they continue instead to occupy this secondary role assisting Israel rather than having American pilots and American bombs directly involved in this. We know President Trump has been very vocal today on social media, posting, talking about an American willingness and a capability to strike offensively, going as far, he said, even as to potentially take out the Ayatollah, putting in for emphasis there, he means to kill the Ayatollah there. So he has made this position pretty clear. He also has been telling reporters over the last couple of days that there was a willingness to negotiate in some way, some diplomatic effort with Iran, but that door may be closing as you played that video. He says he no longer has an appetite to negotiate, and he says that he's looking for, quote, something much bigger than just a ceasefire. Kelly, we also know that President Trump has people around him, both in his cabinet and his allies on Capitol Hill, who have been pushing him to be more aggressive. Potentially, that decision going to be left with the president.
Joe Khalil at the White House, thank you so much for your reporting and keep us posted. So joining us now is General Wesley Clark, retired four-star general with the United States Army. General Clark, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your service as well. I'm glad you're here because I think a lot of our viewers, a lot of Americans want to know where this is all going. We've seen new moves from the White House today, including moving fighter jets to the Middle East. President Trump using the word, quote, we, when he talks about the conflict. Do you believe the U.S. military will get more directly involved, and what would it take for that to happen?
Well, that's the big question. And basically, the president should make and won't make a decision until he has to on this. It's too big of an issue. Right now, it's going fine for Israel. The United States has not been attacked in the region, and there's still a hope that, as President said, maybe we'll get unconditional surrender from the Ayatollahs. Don't think so. But as long as the Israeli effort has the momentum, and it does have the momentum, and the attacks by Iran on Israel are weakening, then there's no reason for us to get involved at this point. We've put the planes there. We've got the air refueling bridge. We've got the aircraft carriers coming in. So we certainly have the assets moving to the region. But this also provides diplomatic impetus for the Iranians, who must be struggling with this issue. How do they preserve the regime? And how much of their nuclear program can they keep if they come back and talk? The President's made very clear, and all of the Israeli friends and Jewish Americans are saying, no enrichment by Iran. No, they don't get peaceful nuclear energy, and they don't get the chance to enrich. But they're still claiming this is the sort of key point in the negotiations. Now, are they willing to give it up to preserve the regime? And if so, how would you enforce it? How will you go into these areas with the centrifuges and rip them out? Some of them have been bombed. Some of them may be inaccessible. There may be radiation all over the place. So there's a lot of issues here. But right now, the administration is wisely watching, bringing resources to bear, ready to go, but no decision so far as we know.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, too, because we know the Pentagon has been saying they're moving additional assets to the region, additional capabilities, and you mentioned it in there. Is that more just for a diplomatic approach, or are they readying, just in case, for something more?
It's both. And this is what you do. You bring the resources in, you put the pressure on for a diplomatic settlement, but those forces have enormous capabilities. Ultimately, if this really goes to the end state, we're going to have people on the ground in Iran who can go to the nuclear sites and exploit those sites, take away the radioactive material, destroy the machines, pick up the paperwork, figure out where else there are hidden sites, go to those sites. So there's a lot of work to do if we're really going to really take away this capability from this country. And if the regime totally surrenders, as President Trump has asked, unconditional surrender, then I guess we'll demand that. Otherwise, probably the U.S. is going to get involved at the tail end of this operation to secure some of the more difficult nuclear sites, to exploit them. Well, and I wanted to ask you, too, only the U.S. B-2 bombers are powerful enough to carry the weapons that would be needed to take out Iran's Fordo nuclear facility. Do you expect those B-2s will be used? Well, that's certainly one of the options that must have been considered and is being planned by the White House. But Israel probably has its own plans on how to do this. They certainly wouldn't be depending on the United States to do this. So I think it's, we're still in the early or mid stages of this. We're not at the point where the B-2s have to be launched. And remember, when you're bombing from the air, even if you have the great penetrating bombs that we believe we have, you're not going to be certain that you've eliminated this. Maybe you've cracked the ceiling. Maybe it's compartmented. Maybe you've taken out one of numerous compartments 200 feet underground. You don't know until you really get there and work it. So it's probably going to be several strikes with B-2s, not just one bomb. General Wesley Clark, thank you for your insight and expertise this evening. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, what's happening overseas is exposing a crack within the Republican Party. Some favor America First approach and don't want to get involved in another conflict. Others, the war hawks, are in favor of the U.S. military jumping into the fight. So please welcome NewsNation contributor and former White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney and Republican strategist Aaron McGuire. So I want to bring you into this conversation. We just heard from the general. He did say there at the end that he may anticipate the U.S. to get involved at the tail end, potentially, of this. I guess I want to start with you, Mick, too, because I know we were talking a bit about the B-2 bombers.
Yeah.
Where do you see this going? And you know the president, of course, as well. Where do you see his thinking on this?
Yeah, if I had to guess right now, we're all sort of guessing.
Right.
You listen to Donald Trump enough, sometimes he'll say this, sometimes he'll say that, sometimes he'll say a little bit of everything. But what has he said here again and again? No nuclear capability for Iran. He has a chance to do that. He has a chance to do that in relatively short order, and that would be using those bunker-busting bombs that General Clark just talked about, using the B-2 bombers. He's got a once-in-a-generation chance here to sort of deprive Iran, regardless of what happens with the domestic regime, regardless of what happens with the Ayatollahs and whatnot. He's got a chance to take away this capability, and I think he's going to do it.
And Aaron, I wanted to ask you, because I know we were back on the campaign trail together. President Trump on the campaign trail promised peace in the Middle East. He kept saying he was coming in here to bring peace, end of conflict. He wanted to end Ukraine on day one. Now he's coming in and, getting potentially involved in some ways with U.S. involvement and targeting and striking down some of the missiles coming into Israel. What do you make of his promise, and what does that say to his supporters and the MAGA base?
One, geopolitics is messy, and so on the campaign trail, it can always be one thing, but in reality, it's always going to be something different because it's always a hypothetical until you're in the situation room and you have to make the tough decisions as commander-in-chief. For the president, though, it's always been peace through strength and America first. If this is an opportunity to not put American troops on the ground, which I think Mick and we were talking about this a little bit, for the president is likely a different line of capability on this, but to be able to do it remote. And we've seen President Trump do remote targeted attacks against adversaries. He's taken out terrorist leaders. He's taken out a number of individuals in these targeted attacks. So if there is something to be done, this would be a much larger escalation of that because it's Iran and their nuclear program. However, targeted attacks to take out something like this is not a departure from the campaign message you've seen from President Trump.
Yeah, I think the details he's going to leave up to the Israelis. Look, regime change, not his problem, right? What happens long term, not his problem. He's got a chance to get rid of the nuclear capability. I think he takes it.
All right. Thank you guys so much. We'll leave it there. We'll see you again in a few minutes, though, after the break. But coming up, a top official in New York City gets arrested at an immigration courthouse.
And I see the warrant. I will let go when you show me the judicial warrant. Where is it?
Why ICE agents took the city's comptroller into custody. Details when The Hill returns. Stay with us.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
What are you talking about? Here's what I'm talking about, Cuomo.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
I just tell you the truth backed up by facts.
Tomorrow at 8, 7 Central, only on NewsNation.
Back to The Hill. I'm Kelly Meyer filling in for Blake Berman. So another high-profile incident involving ICE and an elected official. This is Brad Lander. He's the New York City comptroller running for mayor in New York. And earlier today, he attempted to escort a migrant out of the immigration courthouse to prevent his arrest. And Lander wound up getting arrested himself.
I see the judicial warrant. And I see the warrant. I will let go when you show me the judicial warrant. Where is it? Sir, where is the warrant? Sir, I have my hand here. You're obstructing. I would let go. You don't have authority. You don't have authority to arrest U.S. citizens.
And this follows the forceful removal of California Senator Alex Padilla from a press conference being held by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem just last week. Padilla spoke about that incident on the floor today. Take a listen.
I was physically and aggressively forced out of the room, even as I repeatedly announced I was a United States Senator. And I had a question for the secretary.
Once.
And after pausing the execution of ICE raids on farms, hotels, and restaurants for fear of the impact on the workforce and the economy, President Trump has now alerted ICE that they should continue the raids. So a lot to unpack here. The full panel with me now. Aaron McGuire is a Republican strategist. Kurt Bardella is a NewsNation contributor and Democratic strategist. Mick Mulvaney is a NewsNation contributor and former chief of staff in the first Trump White House. And Dan Cannonen, former Battleground States Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining us.
Kelly.
So great to see you all.
She's so much more fun than Bernie.
Oh, man. He should stay on vacation longer.
We miss him, but I'm grateful to be here and glad to be with you guys. Just a lot to break down. I mean, this is just the latest in a series of elected officials, 2 so far, where this happened. I mean, just where is this? How heated is this debate right now within the Republican and Democratic Party? Do you want to start over here?
Yeah, I think right now Democrats are not helping their message anymore with the performative chaos. If they are not good with the ICE raids and the immigration policies of this president, they serve themselves none when what they are doing is impeding with federal law enforcement there. He kept saying you need a judicial warrant. He was completely wrong in that information. He was making a clown of himself. The senator who identified himself did so after he bum rushed a cabinet secretary at a press conference. I don't care who you are, you're going to get dragged out of there. If Democrats have a problem, what they're doing doesn't help by running around with these antics. And so they can have all the issues they want in the world until they figure out how to message on it, because right now Democrats are on the wrong side of the message on an 80-20 issue.
Let me cut to Mick here, because I wanted to ask you, because, President Trump, he's saying that he wants both to deport illegal immigrants, but then also saying that he didn't maybe want to do that when it comes to hotels, restaurants, the farming industry, because he saw the impact on those communities and on those jobs. How can he have both here?
You can't. And I think what you're seeing is that there's a division within the administration. My understanding is one of the ways Trump arrived at that, let's call it the pause on deportations, at least for ag and hospitality workers, was that he got a call from the Secretary of Agriculture. And so the Secretary of Agriculture probably has a very different perspective on this than, say, Stephen Miller or Kristi Noem. So you're going to have that internal division, and the president's going to have to figure out which side he's going to side with. Now we're back. We're done with the pause. He's back deporting people from agriculture and hospitality. Be curious to see how long that holds up.
And Dan, let's go to the protests. There are people speaking out against the president's immigration policies. How do you see this? There's a way for people to speak out and have their voices heard and try to push back on the administration, but then we're also seeing it go to the raids and the looting and the robbery. We've seen Democratic Senator Fetterman speak out about this, but the rest of the party isn't maybe going as far as Fetterman is on it. Where do you see the party's messaging on this?
You can be for strong border security. You can be for a strong immigration program. You can be for deportations. You can be for getting violent criminals out of this country. And I will concede that Democrats did not serve themselves well by not having a coherent posture and policy on this for 4 years. We didn't have a very good message, and that exposed a lot in the election. But it's an 80-20 issue on sort of the basis of deporting criminals, violent criminals. It is not an 80-20 issue on grabbing people off the streets who are going into court to try to get citizenship or to get to their path status through all the right ways. And what Brad Lander was doing for several weeks, he's been showing up, helping folks who are going through that process, coming to their court dates, trying to do the right thing, from getting hauled in an elevator with no due process. People do not want that to be the case. And I want to say something about Alex Padilla in that situation in Los Angeles. What transpired, if you go back and look at the entire video, and this is very important, I think, was Kristi Noem said the words, "We are not leaving. We, the Marines, Homeland Security, the troops, are not leaving here until we liberate this city from Gavin Newsom and the Democratic Socialists." That's what she said. I just want anyone here to imagine, for a second, Barack Obama and Janet Napolitano in Texas saying, "We're not leaving here with the federal troops here until we liberate this from Rick Perry or from Greg Abbott." And imagine Chip Roy or Ted Cruz not saying, "I'm sorry, I've got something to say here." And the minute he did, he was shoved against the wall, handcuffed, and booted out. The American people are not for that, and it's reprehensible.
I disagree, and I've been in that situation, not that exact situation, but I've been a member of Congress, and you always have folks from the other party come in and say stuff you vehemently disagree with. You sit there and you shut up until it's your turn. You don't interrupt. You don't bum rush the stage. You don't do any of that. So I have to disagree. I think you just sit there and you take it if you're a professional. Let's agree on this. We're going to see a lot more of this. You're going to see more of Padilla, more of Lander, because everybody loves it. The Republicans love it because we think we're winning the argument. The Democrats love it because they love the attention and they're fighting Trump. What's the one thing we hear now about Gavin Newsom? He's runched down to the head of the Democrat Party because he's fighting Trump. You're going to see more and more of this because both sides like it.
All right, I got to wrap it there, Kurt. I'll come to you on the other one, I promise.
No, we'll skip Kurt.
I didn't get to him on this one.
Wow. Aaron totally filibustered me. This was planned.
So coming up after the break, a tussle over territory. Why Emmanuel Macron visited Greenland as President Trump eyes a U.S. takeover of the island. And Elizabeth Vargas reports is next. She'll be talking to the IDF about its upcoming attacks on Tehran and whether regime change is the ultimate goal. That's coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern. But The Hill is coming right back. Kurt. Is making moves to bring Greenland closer into the fold. It's officially redrawing the U.S. Northern Command to include Greenland in its area of responsibility. This is largely symbolic, but the president has said repeatedly that he wants to buy Greenland. And now with that said, take a look at the video from the French president, Emmanuel Macron, speaking from Greenland, along with a caption reading, quote, "Greenland is not to be sold." And I ask, what do you see? I'm going to go to Kurt first.
I see that Greenland is not for sale.
That's
which
right.
Is something we keep talking about. So, also, I just want to say everything Aaron said in the last segment was wrong.
My gosh, wow. Really hater. Very unnecessary. What I see is a man who's desperate for an international headline. So Macron's in Greenland trying to act like a strong man. It's sad.
And no one was really watching.
Much like Kurt.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares what Emmanuel Macron thinks about Greenland. Do you care?
I don't, but I find it hilarious. And we're out of grandstanding when Vance went there. You may remember Vance went there not because he was supposed to go, because he'd screwed up on signal gates.
Don't take all this time.
Well, thank you guys. It was so great having you all. I want to thank you all for watching The Hill on NewsNation. Remember to download the Hill app for the latest news in politics.